Good evening, everyone. Thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. The title of our webinar tonight is the role of multi-species swards on organic farms. My name is Joe Kelleher. I'm an organic specialist with Teagasc, and my colleague Elaine Leavy is also an organic specialist. We've two speakers tonight for you, Thomas Moloney, Dr. Thomas Moloney, who's the product and technical manager with DLF. He's going to give us a background on the multi-species swards and the science behind them. Thomas has come from a previous role in Teagasc in Grange, where they would have done extensive trials on multi-species swards, and Thomas is going to give us their findings from that. Plus, in his new role in DLF, he's trialing products on farm, and he's going to give us an update on what's happening with that. Then after that, we have Kevin O'Hanlon, who's farm manager of the Pollard Organic Farm in County Wexford. And Kevin has been trialing multi-species swards on his organic farm for the last number of years. And he's going to give us an update on how he established them, why he did it, how he did it, and what he's finding, I suppose, is the key. So we were also due to have John Finn, but unfortunately John, since his apologies due to unforeseen circumstances, he's unable to join us this evening. But we've more than ample information with Thomas and Kevin. Thomas, we understand, is having some technical difficulties trying to log in, so we're working on trying to get him in there at the moment. Kevin, I don't know, are you there, Kevin, at the moment?
I am, yeah. Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button.
Would you be okay, Kevin, if we start with your presentation?
Don't mind at all.
And we can bring Thomas in a second once he gets his issues sorted there. Your screen there, Kevin, if you want to share the screen. Yeah. Perfect. No. Oh, sorry, Thomas might be just in the nick of time. You're welcome, Thomas.
How are you? Sorry about that.
Good. No problem
Zoom.
at all.
There's always complications with Zoom on my end.
Yes. So Thomas, I was just telling them that you're kind of wearing two hats tonight. You're wearing your previous Teagasc hat and the trial work you would have done in Grange, trialing multi-species over a good few years, and also your new role with DLF as the product and technical manager, and you're doing a lot of on-farm trial work there. So I don't know if you're ready to start presenting there, and we might get going straight with your presentation, and you can give us the background to multi-species and what you found in that trial.
Yeah, okay. So as they were saying there, the focus for my section this evening is the project up in Grange, part of my PhD, but I'll just give you a background, I suppose, as to what exactly a multi-species sward is. I'm sure it's nothing new to organic farmers, but we'll just go give it a quick run over. So multi-species swards is a mixture of different plant species and plant families, probably more importantly. So usually, or the ones that we see these days are mixtures of grasses, legumes, and herbs. So there's a lot of research from, I suppose, the Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand in particular, the UK have a good bit, and now in the last probably 7 or 8 years, there's a lot more research coming from Ireland, from at home, showing that there are significant production benefits associated with these kind of multi-species mixtures when they're used compared to perennial ryegrass, conventional perennial ryegrass swards, and even the perennial ryegrass white clover mixtures that are being promoted these days. So we can get improved dry matter yields from these multi-species mixtures, and maybe more importantly is the seasonal distribution that can come with these improved summer production by the inclusion of legumes and herbs in our sward. And then maybe for the conventional guys in the top going now is we can do all this at much lower nitrogen fertilizer use, and I'll show you later on that you can do it with no nitrogen at all. And then of course drought tolerance. These swards, and hopefully Kevin will tell us too, that these swards can remain productive even when regular grass swards are drying up.
Apologies, Thomas, can you share screen? Can you share your screen? Have you a presentation? We just see.
Good.
No, just I'm just
where you're not seeing anything at all.
No, we're seeing you, which is
right.
Just we haven't seen.
Whereabouts is share screen?
You should be able to share screen.
Should be in the middle of your screen at the bottom, Thomas, there.
Yep.
How are you now?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
put it to PowerPoint then too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Perfect. Yes, perfect.
Okay. How do I get rid of that now? Right. So where was it? Animal performance is what I was on about. Yeah. So there's more and more work coming on stream to show the improvements in animal performance in milk yield, in live weight gain with sheep and cattle, and then also there's effects of reduced parasite burdens as well. And then of course there's the environmental stuff that is associated with more efficient production from the animal, and also the swards themselves. So there's evidence to show that they might be better at sequestering carbon, obviously because there's more species in the mixture. They have a better quality of biodiversity, some water quality benefits associated with reduced fertilizer use and maybe nutrient cycling, and of course nitrogen use efficiency. So how it does that, I suppose, is based on diversity promoting production, and each component that you add to or that you include in your multi-species mixture brings its own qualities and its own traits to the mixture, and to hopefully promote synergies within the sward. So usually the mixture's performance is greater than the sum of its parts. So if you take this for example, this was the kind of a standard, or the kind of standard so far this year, 6 species mixture. We've got the 2 grass components on the left hand side with Timothy and perennial ryegrass. So these are bringing early season growth and quality and ground cover to the sward. Nitrogen, and then the nitrogen fixers are red and white clover. These are probably driving a lot of the production that we see in these swards, and they're also high protein, as we know, and they're strong growers in the summer as well. And then I suppose to bring it a step further from what we're used to from the grass legume swards, is the icing on the cake, I suppose, is the herbs, and they're kind of the new ones to the equation. So the herbs in their own right would be excellent quality forage. To be chicory in particular, be highly palatable, be high in protein itself. But these 2 guys are particularly rich in minerals, so they can bring, this is something new that they're bringing to the mixture. And also summer growth and drought tolerance, as you can see from their slightly bigger root habit, especially in the chicory, would be really strong in terms of growing well in drier conditions. And I suppose all this in combination, where you've got early plants that will grow early in the season and plants that will grow later in the season, they're flattening our grass growth curve that we know so familiar with, and they're giving us increased production throughout the season over a longer period in the season. And I'll show you that later on, hopefully, as well. So my project, or what I'm going to focus on now, is multi-species swards for silage. And this was a question that has come up a lot over the last couple of years as these have become more and more focused on in the public. So people want to know, can you make silage from this, because it is such an important part of our grassland systems, organic and conventional. So my PhD was part of the Smart Grass project, which is one of the first big projects, started in 2014. One of the first big projects to look at these swards compared to our conventional ryegrass or white clover swards in under conventional management practices. So Smartgrass was Department of Agriculture funded project, and there was a number of different strands to it. And there was a grazing study in UCD by Connie Grace and Tommy Boland and Bridget Lynch. You probably saw some of the really promising results from that. And there's a silage part, which is my part, and then piggybacking off those 2 bigger projects, as they were looking at the different effects on biodiversity of the plants and of above and below ground vertebrates like earthworms, things like that. And also there are soil chemistry aspects and greenhouse gas fluxes as well. So as I said, grass silage is important in Ireland, especially. It's the primary form of conserved forage on most farms. It's made on 82% of farms. And silage is produced by the fermentation of a high moisture crop, which is the technical definition, I guess. So we want to make silage from grass or any crop. We want anaerobic conditions, and we want a lactic acid dominant fermentation, and this reduces the pH and essentially pickles the crop that you're trying to preserve. And you want, the idea is to maintain crop quality. Typically it's grass that we make silage from, because it's just the chemical composition of grass, of perennial ryegrass, favors the preservation. It's got a relatively high water soluble sugar content that feeds the lactic acid bacteria that produce the acid to make the fermentation. It has a lower buffering capacity, which means it resists, it's less resistant to the drop in pH. and it's generally got a higher dry matter content, which can help to eliminate some of the bad bugs that we don't want in our preservation. So the project at Grange is a shot of all the plots with 360 plots. Sown on the way into Grange there for anyone that's been in Grange on the main avenue, and we had two broad sets of plots for 2 trials set up there. You can kind of see them. There's the lengthways and the small square, 2 different trials. But overall, over the course of the 4 years in those 2 trials, we were looking at the yield, the nutrient value, the persistence of these swards, growth stage indices, things like that, the ensilability obviously, and their ensiling efficiency of multi-species swards, and a host of other I suppose grass red clover combinations and grass swards as well, to see how they performed under a 4 cut per year silage system. So just from of interest from an organic perspective, we had a couple of different grass species monocultures sown, and these received a pretty high rate of fertilizer for the year. And we also had a red clover monoculture that received no fertilizer for a year, and again cut 4 times a year these mixtures. And so there's the grass monocultures getting fertilizer compared to the red clover getting no fertilizer. But we also had these same grasses in a mixture with red clover receiving no nitrogen for the year. And you can see, I guess the grass red clovers performed pretty well when you consider the amount of nitrogen that went on the monocultures, and they're punching well above their weight there, I guess, for something that received no nitrogen. So I guess it just shows you the importance of clover and the potential that we have in red clover, especially in silage systems. So getting on to the multi-species part, I guess this is our headline treatment, and the one that I always end up talking about. Was when we compared our perennial ryegrass monoculture to our 2 multi-species mixtures, and had a look at their response to increasing nitrogen. So we had nitrogen rates on these 2 mixtures and grass sward from 0 up to 360. So we had 0 kilos of nitrogen, 120, 240, or 360 kilos per hectare across the year. So as you can see, our mix 1 there is a kind of a grass clover multi-species mix, and then mix 2 is something a little more familiar, with the plantain and the chicory included as well. So we harvest these plots 4 times a year using the Halbert there. It's flat out for 2 years in September in 2014 and 15. And so this is the yield results from that trial from those 2 years. So it's the impact of the addition of nitrogen to your ryegrass and the addition of nitrogen to your multi-species sward. So I guess the first thing is, and the obvious thing is, the response of the perennial ryegrass to nitrogen, which it almost doubled its yield when you applied the higher rate of nitrogen, and less so of a kick from the mix, the grass legume mix and the grass legume herb mix, from mix 2. But I think the thing to look at here is, if we look at the ryegrass monoculture receiving the full whack of nitrogen, and you look at the 2 multi-species mixtures receiving 0 in this case, and up to 220, and up to 240, I suppose you're not the lower yields here aren't as big as you would think, as you think they'd be. So the multi-species mixtures are performing as good with no nitrogen as a perennial ryegrass sward receiving a lot of nitrogen from 240 kilograms up. A lot of this, I suppose, the lack of response that we see in mix 1 and mix 2 is probably a lot of it is down to botanical composition. So this is the botanical composition over the 2 years of the 5 species mixture, the one that has grasses, legumes, and herbs. And you can see in both years, more obvious in year 2, as we go from 0 up to 360 kilos of nitrogen for the year, the grass proportion increases and the clover proportion in red decreases pretty nicely in line with the addition of nitrogen. The herbs in blue there kind of a little bit more, I guess, inconsistent, but still not as affected or not as obviously affected by the addition of nitrogen, because of course chicory and plantain will use the nitrogen that's given to them. So this is just a picture of your 0 kilo 5-way mix. Your 0 nitrogen 5-way mix and your high nitrogen 5-way mix. So the clover is gone. So you're just substituting your nitrogen source in that case. And that's why we didn't see much of a response in the yield graph earlier on. So I mentioned distribution of yield. I suppose that's the thing that we're kind of focused on as breeders, trying to get perennial ryegrass or grass to grow and extend our growing season into the shoulders of the year, and particularly across summer when we see that slump from grass when it goes into the reproductive phase after say first cut silage time. So on this graph we have our 4 cuts plotted across the year. Our perennial ryegrass is in green, and I suppose they're kind of neck and neck. This wouldn't be a significant difference up here up to first cut silage time when your sward, I guess, is both the mixtures are predominantly grass, so our yields are the same. But as the clovers become more widespread and the nitrogen fixing and the production of the herbs gets into gear, we see the multi-species mixture start to pull away in cuts 2 and 3 and even on into cut 4. So this is where we get this is the time of the year where the multi-species mixtures will pass out the grasses, and that's where you get your higher annual yields, which I suppose is helpful as well from a practical point of view. You're not just producing more grass at a time when you've already got loads of grass up here, you're producing at a time when you might be a bit short or when you need the grass. We looked at herbage, the chemical composition of the herbage before we installed it. So it's with dry matter digestibility and crude protein are the two key ones for nutritive value and in terms of feeding quality for the animals. Your grasses are in green here. Again, not such a significant difference for your first cut when it's predominantly grass across the monoculture and the mixtures. But then as we head into cut 2 and the legumes and the herbs become more dominant in the sward, we see a slight drop off in DMD. For the next 2 cuts. I wouldn't worry about this too much. I guess it's a factor of the tests that or the analysis that we carry out during these trials. So the DMD test from for example it'd be set up for grass to analyze grass. So the different nature of the legumes and the herbs means that they're digested, or what happens in the animal when they go into the animal. It's a little bit different to grass. So we'd see it'd be fairly well established that the likes of a high clover content sward, you'd have higher animal intakes. Even though on paper you might have slightly lower digestibility, but this higher intake makes up for that apparently lower digestibility on paper, and leads to our increased animal performance. The obvious one then, crude protein, is higher in the multi-species mixture. The mixture is where we have a fairly good proportion of clover in the mix. So on the silage side of things then, if you are making silage, your WSC or water soluble carbohydrate content and buffering capacity are probably the two important variables, and this graph wouldn't bode well for anybody trying to ensile multi-species compared to a ryegrass sward. So we want good sugar content. It's supposed to feed the lactic acid bacteria to produce enough lactic acid to preserve the crop, and it's obviously not as strong in the multi-species mixtures because I suppose clover is not as high in water soluble carbohydrates naturally as grasses. And a similar story with the buffering capacity. The buffering capacity is higher in the legumes in particular, because than the ryegrass. So doesn't bode well for ensiling this stuff. But what happened, I suppose, in real life was a bit more interesting. And so get my excuses in first, I suppose. Silage making is more of an art than a science. It's a diverse, complex, heterogeneous, and uncontrolled process. So basically, a lot can go wrong, as we all probably know, when we're making silage. So I remember my supervisor used to say, and it's probably stuck with me, when we're making silage, you're trying to stack all the odds in your favor. So you're making sure you're cutting your field at the right time, you're cutting it in good weather, you're giving it a wilt, and you're doing, I suppose, you're trying to keep it to best practice between getting your crop from the field to the pit and keeping a mind in your bales, keeping your bale sealed, keeping your pit sealed until the fermentation is finished. So I suppose this is what we're looking for when we're analyzing a silage sample and trying to determine whether we had a good fermentation, whether it worked or whether it didn't. And this is just a standard grass sample that I dug out. I'm not going to show you the complex tables for the multi-species and all the different combinations, and it'd be bamboozled. So we're just going to go with kind of a template here. And so obviously we're looking for a lactic acid dominant fermentation, which we have here. On the left-hand side, our ratio of lactic acid to the other fermentation products is high compared to the poor preservation on the left-hand side. A lot of other byproducts produced in the poor preservation. We got our pH down low quickly, which we want, relatively higher there. And by ensiling it efficiently and having an efficient fermentation, we kept our quality. So we started off with 82 DMG, and we're still at 82 DMG in the good preservation, and we lost a little bit in the poor preservation. So I guess the big headline from the silage part of the project was that under favorable conditions, the multi-species can preserve as well as silage as comparable to perennial ryegrass. But it is, I suppose, the dry matter and the lower dry matter in the clover-rich swards, multi-species swards that are important to remember. So I guess what I would say to farmers is kind of think of it like you're insiling a grass-fed clover crop, and make sure to cut it dry and to give it a good wilt after you cut it. That's probably more important than the apparently low WSC and the high buffering capacity. The dry matter, I would say, tends to overrule that. And if you ensile it dry, you're helping yourself. You're helping to cover up some of those lacks in the sugar content and the buffering capacity. And so overall, I suppose the overall conclusions from the 4 years work was that both the multi-species, the grass legume multi-species mixture and the grass legume herb mixture produced greater annual yields than the perennial ryegrass mixture or perennial ryegrass sward. And this is most obvious at the 0 or low rates, and I'd say probably up to about 200 kilos of nitrogen. This is a fairly significant difference. And of course, then again, the seasonal distribution is an important factor to think of that you mightn't think of when looking at graphs or headlines like that. Overall, as I said, the digestibility on paper was lower, and the crude protein was greater for the multi-species than the perennial ryegrass, as you might expect with the clover content. And the quality and the insilability the herbage quality and insilability did not reflect the proportions of the species present. So that's what I meant about so on paper, the individual components of the mixture might not lead well to ensiling, but once these guys are putting the sward together and they're growing together, that they have different relationships and they're affecting each other in different ways than when they're grown in monoculture. So I suppose we need to start doing a few more trials with these mixtures mixed together, grown in the ground, grown together, rather than just looking at the individual components and saying that 1 and 1 equals 2, because it definitely doesn't once you get into the complex 3, 4, 5, 6 and beyond multi-species mixture. And as I said, it can preserve satisfactorily as silage if you have the right weather conditions. Just so what I'm at now, as you said, I'm the product manager at DLF. I'm involved a lot in the research side of what DLF do. We have our trial site down in Waterford here, where we assess our new perennial ryegrass varieties, new clovers, new lucernes, different things coming on stream. And we also have our partner farm program that Kevin's part of. Kevin is the guy who's leading the way, I suppose, on the multi-species side of things. I hope to get the multi-species on the conventional guys' farms next year and try and convert them. We're involved in the Legacy Net project, which is a global multi-species project between Teagasc and Trinity College and the University of Kiel. I think they have 30 odd sites across the world where they're trying to untangle some of the relationships between each of the species in these mixtures. I suppose from a DLF and a commercial point of view, we're kind of looking at mixture formulations and how we can improve on the mixtures that we have there. So things like spring growth is probably an issue with these multi-species swords. So can we tweak the components, especially the grass components, and get grass varieties or species that will grow earlier on in the year to try and fill that gap before the clover and the clovers and the herbs start producing. We also have grazing rate clovers. Obviously, we probably recommend these swords for grazing. So we have red clover as part of our mixture. So it might make more sense if we could get some of these new grazing type red clovers that are a bit more resistant into these mixtures. And there's different plantain and chicory varieties, a couple of those sown in the ground this year as well. So we'll be keeping an eye on those over the next year or two to see if there's any significant differences between variety. And also nitrogen inhibiting plantain varieties. There's some promising work coming out in New Zealand that that suggests that the inclusion of plantain, even on its own in a grass sward, has really positive effects on nitrate leaching from grassland, especially from year-round patches. So there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of work has been done on these types of swards, and hopefully we'll keep learning, keep finding out more stuff over the next few years.
Thank you, Thomas.
That's me.
I suppose we're going to leave questions until the end, and if anyone has questions, just put them into the questions and answers section there at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get Kevin and Thomas to take the questions together at the end. While we're just getting Kevin going, Thomas, there is one question there for you, and it's would an additive help the preservation of the silage?
Yeah, so I forgot to mention additives. Yeah, so either good wilt or an additive or both. Yeah, that would have been one of our conclusions from that. Yeah, would do no harm.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. Kevin, are you good to go?
I suppose I am.
Is my screen okay? Is it?
Yeah,
Can everybody-
excuse me. I can see it anyway.
Good.
I presume everybody else can.
Yep.
Yeah. Just
Okay, work away, Kevin. Sorry, I'll just introduce you, Kevin. Kevin is the farm manager in the Pollard Organic Dairy Farm in Ballywilliam. You've been dabbling in multi-species for a few years, Kevin, and only recently went organic. So you're going to give the background on why you sowed these multi-species swards, how you did it, and what you're finding as a result of it. So it's mostly picture-based as the presentation, and we have a few videos in the middle of it. So yeah, it's like taking a virtual tour on Kevin's farm, this presentation. Over to you, Kevin.
On the work farm. Yeah, as I said, we're based in County Wexford here. I suppose it was after a drought of 18 that we start looking into different things, I suppose. And I was looking through the DLF brochure and I came across the multi-species sward. So I went kind of investigating it after that and seeing what it's about and the components that were in it and everything for the farm here where I manage. And it looked good. So we said we try a paddock. The first time we put in was I think it's April last year. So we're roughly 18 months in now, thereabouts. All the multi-species swards have never received fertilizer. A lot of them fields now at this stage, their last application of fertilizer would have been September in 2019, so they're the full 2 years now. They would have, they're that length, a good few of them paddocks at this stage. Where the one paddock of cow yesterday is on its 9th grazing this year, and multi-species where that picture of the cow is actually, that's taken the 17th of January. She was in that grazing. But it's, the why, I suppose, was due to drought tolerance aspects of it, because we're very sandy loam farm, so it dries out very quickly. We go into a drought situation extremely quick. I suppose that was the why, and just verification that the results and the initial results and stuff seem that we're using less fertilizer, and that's the road we wanted to go. We wanted to eventually get to go the organic road. So that was a way of doing it. First off, putting on less nitrogen, but we just went whole hog and didn't any nitrogen on it. There was no chemicals. It gets watery slurry every second grazing. That's the way we were kind of compensating things. We style tested every second year to keep an eye on what's happening on the ground. That was kind of the why, I suppose, more so than anything else. The how was a few different ways. We oversowed some. We went in and just went into a grass sward. Like that picture, that's stone dials first of all. That was the first one we did oversowing. So we just have a coon disc with a broadcast seeder on top. We grazed the paddock very tight and came in there with the coon and just went up the field. I don't know why that looks like I'm doing a second run, but I only did one run. But it's we did one run up the field with the coon disc and the broadcast seed out over it. And we rolled it twice then. When I was coming out of the field with the roller, it started raining, so it was absolutely ideal. There was no fertilizers or anything went down with it. Nothing went down with it. That's the field that we did the first time we done. So you can see it's grazed very tight. to give the new plants a chance to get light and get going. Once they kind of appeared and got up a bit, the grass had taken off again, so we went in and grazed it to keep it at bay, to keep light down to the base, and to keep the grass at bay effectively, let light down and let the chicory plantain and the red and white clovers get established. And then the other side of that was footfall with the cows going through. It helped with actually establishing the seed as well, because just the literally cows walking through it. Yes, the other field there was disc twice. The other field was there a second ago. That one was disc twice. It was sowed broadcast on the second sowing. So we went fairly severe on the discing to just to see what way that established. That's the field that's actually after being grazed for the 9th time there a couple of days ago this year. They were the two different methods. We did another field then where we went across it just once with the disc, and we put out the full rate of 6 species sward, or 6 species mix, and that seemed to establish fine as well with just one run. That field was sprayed, that paddock was sprayed off. And yeah, they were the kind of the 3 ways we're after establishing. We ploughed as well. We had high dock burdens in paddocks that you couldn't necessarily, this was after enter conversion, so we couldn't use herbicides. So we went in and ploughed, and went in with the 6 species sward then, and we put in a bit of lucerne that was here on farm as well, to see what it established. So yeah, there's the kind of, there's 4 different methods. There's oversown, a single run of a disc, 2 runs of a disc, and the ploughing. So there are kind of the 3 or 4 different methods of how we do it.
What kind of seeding rates did you use, Kevin?
First we went in at 12, which was the recommended at the time, I think. I'm sorry, jeez, my throat. We've gone the whole up to 18 kilos. There's a sward. I don't know whether there's a still picture or not of it, or a video of it along the way there. But we went in at 18 kilos. That's the paddock. There was a huge dock burden in it, absolute massive dock burden, and we went in and ploughed it, not overly deep, but kind of deeper than what we usually would, slightly deeper than what we usually would, and we went in at 18 kilos to see what it, for weed suppression, more so than anything else, to see what it, and it seems to have worked. There's a fair cover of stuff on it, but it seems to have done what we wanted it to do effectively. But yeah, so the seeding rates are kind of varied, but we're going to kind of, the standard now, I suppose, would be kind of 15, 16 along there, 14, 15, 16 along there, depending on what burden the weeds are in the field and how much suppression we want to try and get out of it. The soil structure, that's in the first field that we done. That has changed. It has changed with the chicory going down because there's deep rooting and stuff. It does go down quite a good bit. So it's, and the worm count has gone up a huge amount since we established the multi-species swards, and there's no chemicals going onto them swards at all. It's just dirty water or dairy washings, or whatever you want to call it. Watery slurry going onto them every second graze, and that's all we do now on the whole platform, grass or clover swards or multi-species swards, whichever. So that's it's I suppose that's the how and of the different things we're doing, the seeding rates and things. We're what's happened, I suppose, is that we're growing a lot. Like, as I said, we're into our night grazing on some of the paddocks, and a good few of the paddocks at this stage. So we'll get another graze now with them in October, no issue. A lot of them, and we start shutting off paddocks in around the 15th of October. So a good few of them will be grazed again. So we'll get our 10th grazing, hopefully, out of the majority of them. As regards milk yield, they do rise when they go into the multi-species. Like, there's no selective grazing that you can see there from 2207. I don't mind her colour. There's no real selecting. Like, she'll just eat their mouthfuls of stuff every time they go in, every time they put their head down. So they're full a lot quicker and they're sitting down a lot quicker, just because the volume is there. A lot of the time, we find that there's fairly big mouthfuls going through them, being taken all the time, and there's no selective grazing. So the bulk tank, it does rise in general about 1.5 litres to 2 litres per cow when we do go into it. It rises fairly well. The constituents don't change a massive amount. They vary here slightly anyway. They go up and down a slight bit, so it's kind of hard to tell. As I said, we're zero fertilizer pretty much this year. We had a bit of protected urea we threw out at the beginning of the year. I didn't put any on, I only went out to grassland. I didn't go onto any of the multi-species swards. So effectively, as I said, most that field you're looking at there is 2 years without fertilizer at this stage. As are the majority of them. There might be 1 or 2 now at this stage because we're putting in more and more that would receive fertilizer. But yeah, so it's kind of what grass we have on farm, and the 9 grazings are being effectively got out of water slurry at this stage, and the multi-species is a massive part of the platform now.
Okay. Just there, Kevin, there's questions coming in, but just one there before we go to the questions. You say 10 grazings in the year. What kind of an average pre-grazing cover would you be going into?
Earlier on, we see you're going into lower covers. I was trying to work this out earlier after our conversation the other day. You're kind of going into lower covers earlier on in the spring. I'd say we're probably up on around 12 tons.
12 tons.
Like you're going in at kind of 13. Earlier in the year, you're going into lower covers because you're buffering them in the spring, you buffer them in the house. Like, so we're calving more or less all year round with 3 blocks, but that's all changing now to an autumn calving. So we're kind of buffering them in the spring. So there's 2 grazes per paddock, and we make up the difference then with the buffer in the house. As graft growth takes off, there's less of a buffer in the house. When after milkings, they can go. So it's I'd say we're probably around the 12. I'm going to grass measure next year, and we'll see exactly what we are growing.
Perfect. Elaine, have you questions coming in there?
I have indeed. Maybe start with you, Thomas. Just a couple of questions here. Is there any available multi-species organic seed mixtures? You're muted there, Thomas.
So at the minute we don't have one, no, but we will for next year, definitely, yeah.
For next year, right. And another one, in relation to the persistencies in heavier clay types like Solihead or heavier, where poaching may be an issue at the shoulders of the year or during wet summers. Have you any opinions or research done in that area?
No, not specifically, but I would say, and I'd say, Kevin, from experience, I'd say to go easy on them in the shoulders of the year if they are at risk. They probably do take a little bit more minding if you're in harsher conditions in the spring or the autumn, just to kind of look after them a bit more.
Okay, and maybe on to you, Kevin. Just somebody here is inquiring, what is your rotation length?
It varies. We get hit here very fast if the weather gets dry. It's a very free draining farm. So like we'll be down to 19, 20 days at times in the year, this year even, like that, when there was no fertilizer, which is no different than most other years. And like we're up to 29 days now, I think, because we're building for the back end of the year. So up around 29. So it varies with growth. Like we fed for 6 weeks. We had to, because we didn't have enough multi-species sward, because we got a kind of a mini drought for all the world here. And the multi-species was the only thing that actually stayed growing. The grass slowed down, didn't stop, was just slowed down. So it's the rotation length is kind of the same as every other farm for all the world. I'm sure with lads with fertilizer it'll be the exact same if we're putting out fertilizer.
And just maybe moving on to that, somebody was wondering what type of pre-grazing covers are you going into?
Varies, like and as I said, in the spring we're going into lighter covers, as I suppose most farms are. But the majority of the time we're going to kind of 1500, that kind of covers on the ground. It looks a lot more when you're looking in the multi-species, but you have to knock off a bit because it's how would you say, it's not going to, there's a lower DM in it than what we in the grass, or lower grammar. Sorry,
yeah, that's actually that second part of the question is actually asking about, is the dry matter much different compared to an all perennial ryegrass when doing grass covers?
Maybe Thomas, you might take that.
Would you?
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say about 5%, take away 5% from your whatever your grass would be.
So if your grass is 18%, your multi-species should be around 13%.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
And just one more there, in relation to the post-grazing height, what are you aiming for there?
You, Kevin, I'd say that one is
for Kevin. Apologies, Kevin.
You there, Kevin? You're after freezing on us.
Thomas, you wouldn't
Ethan.
Wouldn't be.
Go again,
Sorry?
Kevin. Sorry, we missed you there. You froze for a bit.
Oh, sorry. The grade, pre-grade, or the post-grazing heights, you wouldn't be grazing quite as tight as a grass sward. You don't want to hit the growing points of the chicory and plantain and things. So I suppose in theory, that's speeding up your regrowth. If you're not grazing as tight, you have more, but it's, we would generally about kind of 5-6 centimeters, or maybe little weight at times. Depends on the time of year and stuff like that you're not skinning the field completely. It's not like we'll go in, we don't golf ball graze, put it that way. You wouldn't be golf ball grazing. You would leave it, Thomas, probably the proper heights in that, but for me, you would be leaving a bit more than what you would in a grass paddock, just to keep the persistency there.
Okay, and back to you, Thomas. Just was there any assessment of water infiltration rates in the perennial ryegrass and various multi-species plots?
Not in my project, no. But I think the follow-on project that they're doing in UCD now, they're going to be looking at a lot more at water quality. I think they have little farmlets set up in lines, and they're going to be looking at outflow and runoff. They've got the I suppose the drainage water isolated from each of the farmlets, and they can take samples from that. So I guess that could be on the cards for them. I'm not sure exactly, but it might be coming soon. Yeah.
Okay, and how early does multi-species start growing?
I suppose the different parts of it start growing at different times. The grass part will get going first, and probably, I know Kevin on the draw, it probably depends on your land as well. How soon the clovers and the herbs will get going, but the grass was include you have the likes of Timothy in there, and the ryegrass to get going at the very beginning of the year when the growing season starts. So you're trying to balance yourself across the year that way. Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, back to you. How did the swards react to the dry period during July, August this year and last? How did you find they reacted to this?
The grasses wardened. They did suffer a small bit, but they weren't as bad as the grass paddocks next door, if you know what I mean. The chicory and plantain stayed growing, the red and white clover. So whether it was the chicory and plantain bringing up moisture to the rest of the plants beside it, like whether the symbiotic relationship between them, kind of, they did stay. They were the ones that stayed growing. They didn't grow as strong, but they stayed growing. And when other paddocks had kind of stopped, or not stopped, but very slowed down a lot more. They were, you could see it clearly. They were outperforming any grass paddocks beside them or around the farm.
Okay. Question maybe for both of you, maybe to make a comment on. It's probably directed to Kevin, but maybe Thomas, you might have an opinion on it. Is how did you find the overseeding as a method? This person has had success with broadcasting clover, but can it work well for multi-species swords?
Yeah, it worked. It worked here. The first one we done was, we're after doing a few oversowing now. At this stage into grass swards that weren't very old grass swards, so we just went in and instead of doing a whole reseed, just go in with the disc and overseed them. The one we did last year, the video there earlier of the fielding disc, that worked very well. It's established very quickly and got going very quickly. We did one in April this year. It was extremely slow to get going. Absolutely wicked. Like, it's only coming through now, but my theory on that is with every grazing the cows do on it, they're actually walking into seeds, that they're getting more seed soil contact. I don't think I did enough of. I didn't cut it enough to get enough soil up to get the seeds in contact. Some of them appeared straight away, but the more grazings that's getting, the more stuff is appearing on it. So the overseeding, it works for us here. It does work for us here.
I suppose just maybe to come in there, Kevin, when you say overseeding though, you're disking it as well. So it's a bit more than just throw the seed out with the fertilizer spreader. It
is now. That field, that the video there that was overseeding, that one was, I went deep. I went not very deep, but I went deep on that one. The ones I did in April, I didn't go near as severe. Like, there was no, when you turn around, the only reason you'd know you're going up is because the grass was lying over. Okay. You wouldn't see much clay, and I think I should have went a bit deeper with, maybe in hindsight, to get the seed soil contact. But it's, yeah, to see, I suppose, our seeding is not really overseeding in the grander scheme of things. What I call overseeding.
Yeah, you've never broadcast seed out on a grass field as such, a pasture.
No.
Yeah, and you'd be dubious about it, would you?
Probably not. It'd just be slower to come, I would imagine. It's the cows. I'd be very much of the opinion at this stage, what happened with us here, that it's the cows that are actually walking the hill for you by the grazings, and you're grazing it, your rotation, like you could be going into that at 1,000, 1,100 kilos cover, because you want to keep light going down. You want to keep the sward open and keep light going to the new seedlings that the grass doesn't take them over, kind of. So you will be going in at lighter covers. So I wouldn't mind trying it. Go that way. I'd have no fear of trying it. Now, I don't mean to go out and do half the farm. I mean, try an acre somewhere and just put it out and just see. I've put through the slurry. I've tried it through the slurry. It doesn't work through the slurry here anyway. I've tried it.
Thomas, have you experienced the oversown or broadcasting it?
I've seen Kevin's alright, yeah, and I've seen someone fail at it. I guess it's probably similar principles to when you're oversowing clover. You need a kind of an open sward to put it into. You need bare ground for it to go into. I saw guys who oversowed into a field that there was a thatch on, and there was in the general field there was nothing struck, but in the ruts in the tractor where it was compacted, there was plenty of chicory and plantain in there. So I guess it comes down to conditions.
Okay, maybe Thomas, what cover is ideal to carry over the winter?
I'd say, I think probably best talking height rather than covers. Probably about 7 to 10 centimeters. I'd say around 10 centimeters. You probably want, so for the likes of your chicory and red clover, with so they've sensitive enough stems, so you'd like a bit of regrowth on those going into the winter, just to give them a bit of cover. Yeah.
And in relation to what persistence is of the multi-species sward? So what kind of persistence?
Yeah, so I guess the chicory will be the first one to go. Probably we say 3 years, although when I was thinking about it today and thinking back to that trial that I was doing in Grange, those swards would say those plots were sown in the spring before I started. So I would have started then the trials the following spring, and then we measured for 2 years. So that's 3 years. And that graph that I showed you about the botanical composition was, say, it's the 3rd year after sowing. And then I know they were in the ground and managed, but we didn't measure them. We should have measured them, which would have been their 4th year, because that is the number one question on everyone's lips now the last year or two. And so we say 3 to kind of be a bit conservative, but I would say if it's done properly, you'd get 4 years out of the 6 species being there with the chicory. But say after 7 years, you'll probably only have grass and clover left.
And just maybe you probably mentioned it there, but what would be the optimal time to sow multi-species?
I'd say anywhere from the end of April up to the middle of August. Yeah.
And back to kind of the method, would you see much of a difference in direct sow versus fully tilled soil?
No, but I don't like I've seen the lines that are left behind in the direct drill, and I wouldn't like those personally. It won't tiller, so I'd rather it was air seeded or just dropped on the ground rather than put into the slots. Yeah. Okay.
And just finally, before I just in relation to somebody's just wondering, would pre-mowing increase the utilization and persistence of the multi-species swards?
I don't think Kevin will probably back me up in this. They're very forgiving in terms of how quick you have to get around to them. You shouldn't have to pre-mow them. The utilization won't be a problem, even when you are going onto these what look like massive covers. There generally isn't a problem with clean out. So I was at a farm a couple of weeks ago and a guy said, "Oh, I had to bale it was gone too strong." It wasn't gone too strong. You could only leave for 7 or 8 weeks now before it got too strong. Okay. So you shouldn't have to get to that.
And maybe here's a question for Kevin. How do you manage weeds? It's very simple. How do you manage weeds?
How do you manage weeds? We put in, I suppose, now that we're going organic, we have to look at them. Topping and stuff like that. We've mowed multi-species sward and things like that. But I suppose for us, it's kind of like the cows, because there's no nitrogen. I don't know whether it's because there's no nitrogen, that the cows are going in, they're kind of grazing. If we've ducks in fields, but we don't let them get to seed. It's the whole thing, we don't let them get to seed. That whatever's there, we live with. Whatever's there, just don't let any more appear effectively. So yeah, other weeds, I suppose we have thistles, but 2 toppings will generally get rid of thistles. There's not very many nettles, so we don't have a nettle burden here. Docks will be I suppose the biggest, same as most farms. Docks will be the biggest burden, but as I said, if we're going over or if we're going reseeding the paddock, we'll plough it and we'll just put in a higher seeding rate to see, and that seems to work. That's to suppress the docks and suppress the rest of the weeds that are there.
Yeah, and just maybe going back on what you said, but just a comment here: do you do topping, or will cows clean out the next rotation? So you're.
Well, it depends on the time of year, I suppose, more so than anything else. If grass is starting to get stemmy and things like that, there's usually a batch of, as you can see from the first slide there's usually a batch of dry cows going around here. Most times of the year, there's a batch of dry cows. We go from 144 cows up to 180 milking at different times of the year, when they're crossing over and stuff into dryings and calvings. So there'll be a batch of dry cows. If we feel a paddock is, like, we do pre-mown as well, we've no issue pre-mowing. We pre-mowed multi-species this year as well, that I thought had got too strong. Now, we went in and grazed one last week. Probably should have pre-mowned as well. It was gone extremely high. It just bolted in 4 or 5 days. I hadn't been down that side of the farm, and I couldn't believe it went down. But the cows, I let the cows in. They got 3 grazings across and they grazed it out as much as could be expected for a very heavy cover. But it'll be in that again next month, hopefully, and we'll graze and tie on that, and that'll be that off for the winter then.
Okay, and
just on the
go ahead. Sorry,
just
Tom.
on the weeds, there's work out of Johnstown Castle, and we'd see it. I suppose you see it. Kevin surely sees it every day, and I've seen it on lots of farms, that the competition within the mixture does a pretty good job at limiting the weeds. Like, you won't have big strong docks. They seem to they don't like it in the mixture. So the likes of chicory is probably competing directly with the dock. So if you get your chicory in first, there's nowhere for the dock to go.
Okay, just Kevin, somebody here just wants to know, did you find the plantain quicker to get going in the spring compared to the chicory? So what was your experience there?
It would have been last spring. The plantain would have been that bit quicker, yeah. But the chicory has outperformed the plantain at this stage, if you know what I mean, for growth, for leaf, just the size of the chicory plant. But yeah, the plantain will be a bit quicker to get going in the spring. It will be slightly quicker. Like, as I said, the paddock that was there earlier, that the picture of the cow with the sunbeam over, that was the 17th of January, but it was still a goodish cover on it. Like, that was probably saved off in kind of end of October, I'd say, last year. So we're out in that on the 17th of January. We're out the 2nd of January grazing. It's a very dry farm. That'll show you how dry the farm is here. We're out very early grazing every year. So yeah, the plantain will be that little bit quicker in the spring. That's what we found as well. Than the chicory. The plantain will be slightly quicker.
Okay, maybe Thomas, just a question here in relation to the nutrient requirements. Like, what would be the minimum pH, P and K levels needed for establishing, especially for the herbs?
Yes, but those soil fertility recommendations are as per your regular grass sward. So you want your pH to be up around 6.2, 6.5. I guess your P and K index 3, especially for the likes of the clovers and the herbs, to be a little bit more fussy in terms of their nutrient requirements. You might get away with it with grass, take a bit more hardship, but the clovers and the herbs would definitely need their soil fertility optimum. Yeah.
Okay, and again, back to sowing and what is the best time to disc and sow multi-species swards? So if either or both, if you have a comment there.
I'm one for weather conditions. Go by the weather. Once your temperature is up, I think it's about 8 or 10 degrees. Once we're getting into May, I'd be going ahead with it. And then on the closing end of it, maybe the middle of August, in case we get a bad September. It's been good this year, but just to play it safe.
Yeah. What about you, Kevin?
We saw it some 2 days ago.
And maybe
it's just the weather conditions were there. It's good weather at the moment, so.
Okay, well, another about establishing, would using a grass harrow before oversowing open the existing sward enough to allow good establishment? Again, maybe probably to you in there, maybe make a comment on that.
It probably would, because you'd be pulling off all your dead grass out of the way, I suppose. It'll bring it all off it, so you would have more seed soil contact, I presume. It'd have less to sit on for all the world. If you were grazed tight and you bring your grass harrow over, it'll probably open it up more. I'm sure, I don't know whether Thomas has done any of that, but it would, I presume it would open it up more.
Yeah, no, anything that would expose a bit of soil definitely help.
Okay, well, Joe, that's the end. Nobody has anybody. I think that's, yeah, that's okay. Oh, and sorry, apologies. No. What about slurry? application post-establishment, would that help to hinder? So I
Help or hinder, I suppose it is.
Help or hinder, yes, apologies, yes. So slurry application post-establishment.
We do it here. We don't put on directly after sowing it. We say we'll graze it first. We'll graze it first. We don't. I suppose what they mean is would it boost on the chicken plantain, but then would also drive on the grass, which could smother out the young seedlings. You'd be careful of that. We'll generally let it off and leave it alone, and then your seedlings will all come, and you're in grazing at kind of 1,100 kilos. Then once that's back on it, and after that, then we'll go every second grazing. Here we go every second grazing after that. Then with watery slurry, it's not even slurry; it's only watery slurry. We don't agitate tanks. We only agitate them in March. And then for the final application, the back end of the year, that's the only time tanks are agitated.
I'd leave it a chance to establish, all right, before you go putting anything on it. Yeah.
Okay. We out of questions?
We're out of questions, yes.
Okay. Well, we said we'd stick to the hour, so it's just coming up to the hour mark. So I would like to thank Kevin and Thomas, especially for two very good presentations, and Elaine gave you a barrage of questions there, and you answered them all very capably, in fairness. So look, I think if I was to summarize, Thomas, I think your work is shown from Grange like that there's potential to grow 10 to 12 ton per hectare of dry matter of this stuff, which is double what an unfertilized ryegrass sward is growing. So in an organic scenario, it's a huge tool for us to have in the toolbox. So it's one I think that every organic farmer should be looking at. I think, Kevin, what you're finding on the ground is backing up what Thomas has said, in that you're getting 10 grazings and you reckon it's averaging out around the 12 tons. So that's backing up what Thomas's trial work is showing. I suppose there's huge advantages to multi-species swards, not only from the growth point of view. There's anthelmintic properties to these. It's improving the soil health, as you were showing, Kevin, there with your earthworm count. You got a huge increase in earthworm count, so it's helping biodiversity. We still haven't fully quantified the amount of carbon that these multi-species swards are taking down into the deeper layers of the soil. So there's multiple layers of benefits to multi-species swards. There's research ongoing. There's 4 or 5 sites across the country at the moment that are doing research work on multi-species swards. John Finn, as I say, apologise tonight, but the Johnstown Castle are going to do a bit more work on the zero nitrogen side of multi-species, which will add to what Thomas and his team did in Grange. Philip Creighton and his team in Athenry are doing a lot of work in relation to sheep and post-grazing heights and how they interact with the Smart Sward project, as you said in UCD, Thomas. So there's lots of research going on. So we're going to get more and more information as we go along on multi-species swards, and they're definitely a huge benefit to organic farmers. So I think the best way for anyone to find out if they'll work on your farm is to buy a bag of it and sow it and see what happens. I think is the best way to trial it. Kevin is a big believer in that. I was down with him 2 weeks ago, and I don't think there's the same crop grown in any 2 fields down there. I think he's a testament that if you want to find out, try it is the answer, really.
Yeah.
So look, huge thanks to everyone that joined us tonight. We're hoping to have another one in a month's time, another seminar. It would probably be leaning more towards the cereal side of things in a month's time. So we'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and like especially thank the two lads and Elaine for the questions. So that's it, and thanks to everyone, and good night to you all.
Thanks very much.
Cheers.